Everyone says the answer to Australia's housing problem is simple: just build more homes. But if it were that simple, affordability would already be improving. The real issue is not just demand, it is the bottleneck between wanting to build and actually delivering supply. Until people understand that bottleneck, they will keep misreading the housing market, misjudging policy, and making weak property decisions under pressure. Let's start with what Australians already feel. Affordability has worsened. Deposits are harder to build and rents are heavier. A lot of younger Australians feel like ownership keeps moving further away, even when they play by the rules, work hard, save, wait, and stay disciplined. That frustration is real, and in that frustration, blame starts moving around. Investors get blamed, migration gets blamed, governments and developers get blamed. But if we want clarity, we have to move beyond blame and into structure. Housing does not become expensive simply because people want homes. It becomes expensive when a growing country cannot turn demand into usable supply at the speed required. Look at the lived reality underneath the emotion. Australia's population reached roughly 27.6 million by June 2025. We saw annual growth of 1.5%, with net overseas migration adding around 305,600 people over that year. That is more people, more pressure, and a delivery system that moves too slowly. So let's step back from emotion and look at the mechanics. Why does housing supply lag in Australia? The first bottleneck is zoning and planning. Land may exist, demand may exist, capital may exist, but permission does not always exist. If planning rules restrict density, delay subdivision, or make approvals unpredictable, supply cannot respond. The Reserve Bank has explicitly shown that planning restrictions reduce housing supply and artificially inflate prices. In plain English, sometimes the real scarcity is not land, it is permission. The second problem is approval time. Even when a project is viable on paper, delay changes the economics. Every extra month adds holding costs, financing pressure, legal complexity, and redesign risk. The issue is not just whether a project can be built, but whether it can be approved and delivered before time destroys its financial viability. The third issue is infrastructure dependency. Housing supply is not just about releasing dirt. Homes need roads, drainage, transport, water, power, schools, and local services. Raw land is not the same as functional housing supply, which is why federal housing policy is increasingly forced to tie supply ambitions to enabling infrastructure. The fourth issue is construction capacity. Even after a project is approved, it needs builders, labor, materials, and viable margins. High construction costs and acute labor shortages have rendered many projects unfeasible, keeping the market tightly squeezed. The fifth issue is velocity. Population pressure moves faster than approvals and completions. Australia's National Housing Accord targeted 1.2 million well-located homes over 5 years from July 2024. Yet, look at the data. In January 2026, total dwelling approvals fell 7.2% to just 14,564, with private sector higher density dwellings falling by 24.5%. That is the structural reality. Demand moves fast, supply moves through friction, and prices rise in the gap between the two. Now, add the modern layer. Even if supply improves, the average buyer today is making decisions in a highly unstable income environment. AI is beginning to compress roles. Industries are less predictable, and career paths are no longer linear. Households are far more exposed to transitions, contract work, and income volatility. The housing question is no longer just, can I afford this mortgage today? It is also, how durable is my income over the next decade? How exposed is my role to disruption? If my household income falls for 6 months, does this structure still hold? Housing must be approached as risk management, not just an emotional arrival point. A home is not just an asset decision, it is a resilience decision. There's an old biblical principle in Luke 14. Before building, count the cost. That idea is timeless. Yet in housing, people often do the exact opposite. They feel the pressure first and justify the numbers later. They think, if I don't buy now, I'll fall behind. Under that pressure, urgency masquerades as wisdom. But a property decision is not validated by emotion. It is validated by structure. Because once you overcommit, your options narrow. Liquidity disappears. Flexibility shrinks. Small shocks become serious crises. The risk is not always the purchase itself. The risk is buying without a margin of safety. Before you build the life, count the cost of the structure. This is where the rubber meets the road. If supply is structurally constrained, buyers need strict filters. In a hard market, not every purchase is a wise purchase. Here is the stress test. First, buy for durability, not relief. Do not buy just because you are tired of renting or tired of feeling behind. Relief is emotional. Mortgage debt is mathematical. Second, stress test income, not just repayments. Ask yourself, if rates stay higher for longer, does this work? If one income disappears for 6 months, does this work? If strata, insurance, and council costs spike, does this work? If the property only survives in a perfect scenario, the structure is too tight. Third, maintain liquidity after settlement. Do not treat the deposit as the finish line. The real question is not whether you can get in. It is what remains after you get in. Ownership without a buffer becomes fragility overnight. Fourth, separate home logic from investment logic. If you are buying to live in, lifestyle utility matters. If you are buying as an investment, the numbers matter more than the narrative. Do not use emotional reasoning to justify leveraged investment decisions. Fifth, study local supply risk. National headlines are broad, but property is local. Is this area likely to be rezoned? Is supply constrained by geography and planning, or could future supply easily dilute your position? Sixth, match your time horizon to your entry costs. In an expensive market, with stamp duty, legal fees, and selling friction, a short hold can turn an average decision into a financial disaster. Ask yourself, are we entering with clarity or reacting to pressure? That is the difference between entry and entrapment. If you were designing reform, where would the real levers be? First, approval systems must become faster and more predictable. Delay is not neutral. Delay is a heavy tax. Second, infrastructure has to move concurrently with housing targets. Announcements mean nothing if the utilities and roads are not ready to support the delivery. Third, we need better alignment of incentives across local, state, and federal governments to remove the political penalties of densification. Finally, reform must balance fairness with stability. Shock the system too aggressively, and you damage confidence and construction pipelines. Move too slowly, and younger Australians continue to pay the price for structural cowardice. The real policy question is this: how do we increase supply fast enough to improve affordability without destabilizing the broader construction ecosystem? Housing in Australia is not expensive because one specific group is evil. It is expensive because demand is immediate, supply is delayed, approvals are slow, infrastructure is finite, and too many people make long-term financial decisions under short-term emotional pressure. Do not just ask whether a property is desirable. Ask whether the financial structure underneath it is durable. In constrained systems, the boldest move is not always the wisest one. In constrained systems, speed is political, margin is personal.